Allies of House Speaker Mike Johnson are warning any effort to remove him as Speaker could delay the certification of the 2024 election. Lawmakers will hold a speakership vote January 3rd. That is next Friday. And they will vote to certify the election on January 6th. If a speaker is not elected by that date, lawmakers are not going to be sworn in, and they cannot certify the election. It took about 3 weeks for Republicans to replace former Speaker Kevin McCarthy last year. But remember, that was the first time that McCarthy held his spot. He lost 14 votes and got through on the 15th. It can be a tough group. Let's bring in one of the group right now, Texas Congressman Pat Fallon. He is urging President-elect Trump to reaffirm his support for Johnson, telling Fox News Digital Trump's endorsement would be incredibly powerful. Politico also reporting Trump isn't happy with Speaker Johnson despite avoiding a government shutdown last week. The incoming administration is questioning whether Johnson is capable of managing the Republicans' razor-thin majority. Trump also felt, quote, blindsided by the first continuing resolution deal that Johnson struck with the Democrats. Now, lawmakers telling Maria whether or not Johnson should be removed. Watch.
I think that we need to stay the course. I mean, we had chaos when Kevin McCarthy was taken out, and Mike Johnson was somebody that all the different factions could support, and I don't see it being any different right now.
Rather than getting rid of the debt ceiling, you get a speaker with a spine who puts forward a spending plan that actually encourages conservatives like myself and some members of the Freedom Caucus to join on.
Are you saying you'll support Mike Johnson?
I think it's good to mix it up and let them know we are not happy with the job they're doing.
We need to back President Trump, and if President Trump is going to back Johnson, I'm sure that he will be the speaker.
I know there have been a number of members who have expressed interest in continuing the conversation about Speaker Johnson and where we go from here, but I think he's been working very hard to try to accommodate the needs of the individual House members and the priorities of the incoming administration.
Joining me now is Georgia Congressman Buddy Carter. He is a member of the House Budget, Energy, and Commerce Committees, and he's going to be sharing a couple of things coming up. All right, Congressman, good morning and great to see you. We're going to get to your new assignment in just a second. But first, let's talk about this fight over Speaker Johnson. Now, you know, his allies are saying that all that Donald Trump needs to do is to invite him to Mar-a-Lago, have a conversation, take a picture, put his support out there for Johnson, and then we can get the election certified by the deadline.
Well, I would agree, and I fully support Mike Johnson, and I think if President Trump does endorse him, that he will be the next speaker, and he deserves to be. He's done as good a job as anyone could have done with the cards that have been dealt to him. I don't see anyone else who could possibly do any better than what Mike Johnson has done. The last thing we need right now is another situation like we had 2 years ago with Kevin McCarthy. Let's hope that we don't do that.
And that's what I mentioned in the introduction to you, that he had 14 failures. He hung on to his spot after the 15th vote. Mike Johnson turned that around. But look, this is about the first 100 days, Congressman. And the concern here, if we do have some more chaos in the House, and we've already seen that with the CR last week, is that you're going to have a delay of that 100-day agenda. And it's important for Donald Trump to get in there day one and begin to make things happen.
Absolutely. You're a very astute observation. The first 100 days are going to be very, very important to Donald Trump's administration, to this upcoming administration. And we all understand that. And the last thing we need is a speaker's race or controversy there. We all need to be together concentrating on promoting the agenda that this president has. Remember, Americans voted overwhelmingly to put him in the office and to change things. And he's got to do that, and he's got to have our support to do it.
Well, I want to talk about spending, staying with what we saw with the budget fight in Washington. The Department of Government Efficiency's X account highlighted some of the more outrageous government spending we saw in 2024. And this is what the American people want. They want this spending cut. Here are some of the things they found. More than $2 million for border security for Paraguay, not the U.S., $20 million on a new Sesame Street show in Iraq, $10,000 to support a climate change-focused ice skating show that, by the way, featured drag queens. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul's annual Festivus report showed over $1 trillion in needless government spending he says can be axed immediately. Some of the more egregious spending includes $12 million spent by the Interior Department on a pickleball court in Las Vegas, $2 million Health and Human Services grant to study kids looking at Facebook ads about food, $3 million for the Department of State to spend on girl-centered climate action. Oh, spending was in Brazil, Congressman. You know, and Rand Paul also, by the way, he did say on Fox and Friends, he said, look, he believes the DOGE can help limit and draw attention to spending. But he said to Fox and Friends, quote, the responsibility lies on Congress.
Well, it does, and that's why we have the DOGE caucus, because remember, Vivek and Elon, they're great businessmen, obviously very successful, obviously very smart, and we need them. We need them to identify the waste, fraud, and abuse, but it's going to have to be us in Congress who take it one step further and who change it, because we are the ones with the authority. They're not really going to have any authority. Yes, they can point out problems to us, point out where the waste, fraud, and abuse is and where we need to tighten up, but we in Congress are going to be the ones who have to follow through on that.
All right, let's talk about your new role in the new Congress, 119th Congress, which is incoming. You were selected to chair the Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Health. House Energy and Commerce Committee Chair-elect Brett Guthrie did appoint you to that role. He says this, quote, Congressman Carter's lifelong work as a community pharmacist has given him the unique understanding of the challenges facing our healthcare system and the work Congress needs to undertake to lower healthcare costs. Congressman, talk to us about the work that you plan to do, and what is the first thing that you want to address?
Well, the first thing we're going to address is to increase transparency in healthcare and to incentivize competition. That's what we need to do. Obviously, we came very close to having PBM reform in this last CR. It was part of the initial package. It got pulled. That'll be one of the first things that we do. We've got to get prescription drug prices under control. We've also got to address the egregious legislation that was part of the IRA that has decreased research and development and resulted in 22 drugs being pulled from the market and 40 drugs being pulled out of research and development. We can't afford that. We've got to have cures. We've got to make sure that we're putting patients before profits and that Americans will be able to live healthier and longer lives.
Ashley Davis is on set with me. She's got a question for you.
Oh, I was just saying to hi, how are you, Congressman?
Good, good. Nice
to see you. I was saying to Cheryl before we started that I bet your number one thing would be PBM reform, but I was also going to ask you about 340B. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. 340B is a program that has evolved into something that was never intended to be. And what we need is transparency. You know, that program was intended for federally qualified health centers and for rural hospitals, but it has evolved into something much more than that. And look, we get it. We understand that there are needs in these hospitals, but we're never going to be able to address healthcare costs unless we have transparency, unless we can see where the problem is. And that's where the 340B program is being used by these larger healthcare centers to cover up those problems that we have. We need to identify those concerns, and that's the way that we can address them.
Congressman, we're really looking forward to your work on that committee. In particular. Congressman Buddy Carter, great to see you, sir.
Good to see y'all. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Oh, Merry Christmas to you.